The Pacific Ocean, 1942. American military commanders face a crisis that has nothing to do with bullets or bombs. Every code they create, the Japanese break within hours. Battle plans, troop movements, supply routes, nothing is secret. Every time American forces try to coordinate an attack, the enemy already knows it is coming. The war in the Pacific is being lost not on the battlefield, but in the airwaves. And then a former Marine named Philip Johnston walks into a military office with an idea so simple, so unexpected, that it will change the course of the war. He suggests using a language that no enemy cryptographer on Earth has ever studied, a language with no written form, a language spoken by fewer than 30 people outside of one specific corner of the American Southwest, the language of the Navajo people. Act 1. A people America tried to erase. To understand why the Navajo code talkers matter, truly understand it, you have to first understand what America had done to the Navajo people for the century before they were asked to save it. The Navajo Nation, located across what is now Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, had been subjected to one of the most brutal campaigns of forced assimilation in American history. In the 1860s, the U.S. government forced the Navajo people on what became known as the Long Walk, a forced relocation of over 10,000 Navajo men, women, and children across 300 miles of desert to a barren reservation at Bosque Redondo, New Mexico. Hundreds died on the march. Hundreds more died at Bosque Redondo, where the land was unlivable and the conditions were deliberately punishing. After returning to their homeland, the Navajo faced decades of U.S. government policy designed to eliminate their culture. Their children were taken from their families and sent to boarding schools, government-run institutions, where speaking the Navajo language was forbidden. Children were punished, sometimes physically, for using their native tongue. The explicit goal of these schools, stated openly by their administrators, was to kill the Indian and save the man, to erase Navajo identity and replace it with American conformity. And then, in 1942, the United States military came to the Navajo people and said, "We need your language, the language we spent decades trying to destroy. We need it to win the war." Act 2, the code itself. Philip Johnston, the son of a missionary who had grown up among the Navajo and was one of the few non-Navajo people who spoke the language fluently, brought his idea to Major General Clayton Vogel of the Marine Corps in February 1942. Vogel was skeptical. Johnston arranged a demonstration. Navajo speakers transmitted and received a military message in Navajo in 20 seconds. The Marine Corps' most sophisticated encryption machine took 30 minutes to do the same thing. The program was approved. The first 29 Navajo recruits, later known as Original 29, were enlisted in May 1942. They were taken to Camp Pendleton in California and given a task that had no precedent: create a military code based on their own language that could be used to transmit any battlefield message quickly and without detection. The code they created was extraordinarily clever. Military terms that had no Navajo equivalent were assigned Navajo words based on analogy. A submarine became iron fish. A battleship became whale. A fighter plane became hummingbird. Bombs became eggs. The commanding general became war chief. For letters of the alphabet, needed to spell out proper names and specific locations, each letter was assigned multiple Navajo words, so the same letter could be transmitted different ways each time, preventing pattern recognition. The letter A could be Wulachi, the Navajo word for ant, or Bilasana, apple, or Tsenil, axe. The result was a code that worked on two levels simultaneously. First, you had to speak Navajo fluently, which almost no non-Navajo person did. Then, even if you somehow understood the Navajo words, you had to know the code itself to understand what they meant. Japanese cryptographers, who had broken every other American code, never broke the Navajo code. Not once. Act 3, Iwo Jima. The most famous testimony to the effectiveness of the Navajo code talkers came from Major Howard Connor, the signal officer for the 5th Marine Division during the Battle of Iwo Jima in February 1945. Iwo Jima was one of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific War. The island was heavily fortified by Japanese forces who had constructed an elaborate network of tunnels and bunkers. The fighting lasted 36 days. Nearly 7,000 American Marines died. Japanese casualties were even higher. Of the approximately 21,000 Japanese defenders, fewer than 1,100 survived. Throughout the battle, Navajo code talkers worked around the clock, transmitting and receiving messages at a pace that conventional encryption could never have matched. Connor had 6 Navajo code talkers working continuously during the assault on Iwo Jima. After the battle, he made a statement that has become one of the most quoted in the history of the Code Talkers program. Were it not for the Navajos, Connor said, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. That is not the assessment of a historian looking back. That is the assessment of the man who was there, watching it happen, who knew exactly what the Code Talkers were doing and what would have happened without them. Act 4. The secret they were forced to keep. When World War II ended in 1945, the Navajo Code Talkers came home. And then, like the Ghost Army, like so many others, they were told to say nothing. The code was classified. The military wanted to keep it available for potential future conflicts. The Code Talkers were forbidden from telling anyone, including their own families, what they had done during the war. They returned to the Navajo Nation as veterans, but as veterans who could not speak about their service. This silence had painful consequences. Veterans who had served in other capacities were celebrated. Parades, ceremonies, community recognition. The Code Talkers could say only that they had served. Not how, not where, not what they had done. In some cases, the Code Talkers returned to communities still living under conditions of extreme poverty and federal neglect. Communities that the same government they had served was still failing to adequately support. Some Code Talkers struggled deeply with the silence. They had done something extraordinary, something that military commanders had called decisive to the outcome of the war, and they could not tell a single person. The psychological weight of that enforced invisibility was real and lasting. Closing sequence. The Navajo Code was declassified in 1968. Public recognition came slowly after that. And then, finally, formally, in 2001, 56 years after the end of World War II, President George W. Bush awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the original 29 Navajo Code Talkers, the men who had created the code. Of those 29 men, only 5 were still alive to receive the medal in person. Today, the Navajo Code Talkers are recognized as one of the most important contributions to American military victory in the Pacific. Museums across the country honor their service. Schools teach their story. But there's a question underneath all of it that history has not fully answered. The United States government spent decades trying to erase the Navajo language through boarding schools, forced assimilation, and cultural suppression. That same language then became one of the most important tools in American military history. And then, for 23 years after the war, the government kept the contribution secret, denying the Code Talkers even the private dignity of being able to tell their own families what they had done. The Navajo Code Talkers did not save America despite what America had done to them. They saved it with the very thing America had tried to take away. That is either the most American story ever told, or the most complicated one. Perhaps it is both. Fade to black. The Navajo Code was never broken by the Japanese. Of the original 29 Code Talkers who created the code, only 5 were alive to receive the Congressional Gold Medal in 2001. The code remained classified until 1968, 23 years after the end of World War II. An estimated 400 to 420 Navajo men served as Code Talkers during World War II. Many returned home to poverty and federal neglect, on the same land the U.S. government had forced their ancestors back to after the Long Walk. And